everybody. Welcome back to the practice of being human. Today, I want to talk about story, but more specifically, we're going to talk about perspective and how perspective shapes our stories. Have you ever noticed how maybe there are things outside of you, a person, a thing, a circumstance, that hasn't changed per se, but your perspective of it has? And then as your perspective of it changes, your experience of it changes. And that person did nothing to change, nor maybe did the circumstance really take on a different shape, except for inside of you. But it's everything, because then you show up for that person or that circumstance very differently, right? So this episode actually began with a session that I had with a woman named Susie. She is a psychotherapist, a coach. She's also a clairvoyant. And whether that language resonates with you or not really isn't the point of the story. What matters most here is that she helped me shift perspective, which changed a story that I have had for a very long time. And I've been in process of editing my story as I have continued in my life. And so much of my story has needed some editing. But for most of my life, I carried a story about my childhood and about my dad in particular, that it's not a malicious story. And like many of us, there were things in my childhood that were beautiful and supportive and nourishing and really good. And then there were things that were missing. Moments where I longed for maybe some more emotional presence, maybe moments, stretches of time, years where I wished to feel more deeply understood. Moments where I felt a little bit on the outside, or a lot, or maybe for most of my childhood, I always kind of felt like I didn't quite belong, wasn't quite fitting in to the system. And without even realizing it, I built a narrative around that experience. And the narrative was simple. I was on the outside. But in this session with Susie, something shifted because she reflected this back to me in a way that I had never really considered before. It's so helpful to talk to someone and to share our story because they can then reflect it back to us, mirror it back, and we can hear it. And we might just be like, yes, this is just what it was. And she said, your story isn't random. The position you occupied in your family gave you a particular kind of seeing. So I was the youngest of five. My oldest brother, Mark, was special needs. And then I had a sister, Greta, a brother, Kurt, brother, Carl, and then me. And I came in quick succession to my brother, Carl, about a year later from when he was born. And he and my mom had almost died in childbirth. And that really, I think, rocked the world of just the foundation of our family in some ways. But it shifted the trajectory on a lot of levels. But we were already operating at full capacity, I think. My mom was already finding herself a little bit stretched or a lot. And I think she would probably say, and I think she's been quoted as saying, she probably would have been best having maybe 3 kids, not 5. I was, as they called me, the bonus baby. I came on the scene and I was a surprise. But according to Susie, actually, I wasn't. I was all part of the plan, which I love because that too has helped me shift my narrative around feeling like I came into a family that didn't even really have the capacity to hold me and to see me and to kind of, but instead, I came into a family that I was meant to come into for so many reasons. When she said this to me, something inside of me kind of paused. And I looked back on my life through that lens, and things started to make sense differently for me. Very early in my life, I developed the ability to read the system I was standing in. And what that means is that I noticed, I was very observant of the emotional dynamics. I could sense tension in a room. I could feel when something wasn't quite aligned. And I could detect when closeness was healthy and when it had become blurred. Okay. And at the time, I didn't think of this as a skill. I just thought of it as it was. But in hindsight, it was a form of perception. And this is something that Gabor Maté talks about often. Children are extraordinarily perceptive. I have 4 young adults of my own, and I can tell you that each one of them experienced their growing up, our family, the very system in which they were baked from their own perspective, from their own lens. And they are all so adaptable, right? They all picked up the mood, the environment, the lovability, their belonging, their sense of like where they got their needs met, where they didn't, where they got the hug and the warm embrace, and maybe where they got the pat on the back, and maybe where they got the stare or the stronger voice or the timeout or whatever it was, right? The lack of attention that they were seeking, regardless of what the circumstance, right? There is this incredible capacity we have of making meaning out of the circumstance, and we adapt to the emotional environments that we're born into. So, what looks like personality, I was just talking with a client today, a young woman who is a junior in college, and she believes that that internal dialogue she has, her internal voice is her. It's who she is. And I just offered her, I said, is there any way that you can get a little bit of distance and maybe be a witness of that voice and really listen and turn to her and talk to her and maybe ask some questions, be curious and respond versus believing that is you, because that part of you is so critical and so harsh and so mean to you. And for you to believe that is who you are is such a disservice. It's not true. But it's who you've believed you've been and who you became over time. We were talking about the egocentrism of when we're in childhood, what we make things mean. Everything's about us, right? And there's a safety to that, because if we believe the messiness out there and whatever's going on out there is because of us in here, then there's a bit of a sense of control around that, because then we get really busy at trying to adapt and figure out how to be more well received or to make peace. But we also are able to not make it mean something about our outsides, our parents, our very family system, or just societally, whatever's going on. We keep them in the light. We're the ones that go dark. We're the ones that think something's wrong with us and we need to change in order for it to be okay. And that continues into our young adulthood. And for me, with my clients, it's like, hey, I'm going to wake you up a little bit. I want you to start to see something, to shed light on something, to bring some light in here that otherwise is going to remain in a very dark place for you in terms of what you've made things mean. There's a limitation to what we were able to create meaning around for us. Like we just didn't know how to necessarily have the wisdom that we can start to weave into our stories, into the meaning of things as we age, as we experience life, as we learn more, and as we expand our perspective, our aperture, our lens, right? For her to say that, I thought it was so powerful, because she's thinking her voice, her internal voice, her critical internal voice is who she is. It is not. It is a script. It is a story. It is words that she has learned to speak over and over and over. And now it's just hum. She's not even aware of it. I said to her, do you speak like this to other people? And she said, well, no. And I said, why? And she said, because I'm aware. I'm awake with them. And I said, the best news here is that you can wake up with you and you can change that voice. I think just the importance of understanding what looks like personality is often adaptation. What we identify as, let's be really careful what that looks like, because what looks like sensitivity is often just heightened perception. And what looks like being on the outside may actually be the formation of what we might call kind of a witness consciousness, right? The ability to observe the system that you're standing inside. And that's what I learned to do because even if, quote unquote, I was on the outside, I wasn't fully immersed. I wasn't drinking the Kool-Aid in the same way. I wasn't fitting in to all the holes, right? I was actually not able to kind of fit in. So it gave me that witness consciousness. And when that capacity grows up with you, it becomes something really powerful. And that has been something I have experienced. And I can see that now as such an incredible blessing. Because suddenly I can see something as a gift, as a superpower. It's something that I can see so clearly that others might not be able to see at all. It's just we're all coming at this a little differently, and we're all coming into the world. And I like to think about choosing the families that we come into. Our souls are just kind of lining it up. And this is the perfect family for the work that I have to do in this lifetime, for the limitations and constraints that I am going to work through. My family is the perfect training ground. I like to think of our families as a training ground. It's like a laboratory of the heart and the mind and the body. So when we have these capacities that we grow based on the experience that we're having in our families, the placement that we had, the roles, the responsibilities, how we fit in or did not, and being able for me to notice things that others might not notice and to sense more the emotional architecture of my family. And I could see so clearly who was over functioning, who was under functioning, who is protecting, who is withdrawing, who is listening, who is checked out, who is in control, who is more at the whim of whomever is in control, and who's carrying something that was never theirs to carry. Yeah, those are things that I grew in awareness of, in consciousness of. And this is true for all of us. And I think each and every one of you listening could probably identify with various things that I've just shared, but also come up with your own of what it was growing up in your families and how that shaped you, formed you, and also created such a struggle, such a pain, such a hard, and then how that is part of the work as we go through this life to shed some of that armor, to shed some of those stories, to shed light, to bring light into this very experience in a way that actually is of service to us and helps us put perspective on it. And then we're able to see it less from something was wrong with us and more like it was all in divine timing, divine design, however you want to think about it. So one of the things I appreciate so much about Gabor Maté's work is that he reminds us that trauma doesn't define us, but it does shape the adaptations we make. And this is an important distinction. He says that trauma isn't simply what happened to us, but trauma is what happened inside of us. Hear that. Trauma isn't what happened to us. It's what happened inside of us as a result of what happened. So helpful, right? Because then this is how we understand how our beliefs were formed, how our identities were adopted. Were you the performer? Were you the perfecter? Were you the perfect one? Were you the fixer? Were you the problem child, the troubled one? Were you the identified patient, right? Were you the athlete? What was your identity? The student, the straight A's, whatever. These identities that we adopt, the strategies that we develop to stay safe, because once we adopt these identities, then we develop strategies around these identities. And the adaptations can become incredibly directive because they influence so many things. So relationally speaking, think about this: who we trust, who we love, how we love, what risks we take, how we show up in relationships or not, But here's the thing to all of this. These are not our essence. Like, these are not who we are. They are responses. They are behaviors. They are ways of showing up in a world that we made sense of, that we had the perspective we did and continue to have. And then from there, we keep this story going over and over and over. But with awareness, compassion, and reflection, those stories, those responses, that perspective, those perspectives can evolve. Coolest thing, right? So looking back now, I can see that the position I occupied in my family system shaped the way I understand people. Okay? It taught me to observe. I was called the observer for very good reason. I had a very heightened antenna, very sensitive antenna, right? I also was good at listening, to feel what was happening beneath the surface, even if it wasn't being spoken, but I could read the story that was maybe underneath all of that. And eventually, which is just kind of remarkable to me, is that it shaped the work that I now do in the world. It's helping people, families understand the systems that they are standing in, that they are swimming in. It's the air we breathe. It's the water we swim in, right? It's how we see, metabolize, move in the world. And helping individuals within those family systems. And so it's the individual and it's the collective. It's being able to say, hey, let's understand this system. Let's understand the roles and responsibilities going on here. Let's understand the meaning and the coping strategies and the adaptations we've made within this system. And what are the things that we want to change and that we can change and that would actually offer some relief and some room for growth and a capacity to continue to shed some of our limitations and constraints. Seeing the roles that we play, right? Helping people recognize how childhood dynamics often echo into adult relationships, and not just adult relationships, but into parenting, right? But that's where the story gets even more interesting. Because the deeper realization from that session for me with Susie wasn't just about perception. It was so much about meaning. It deeply landed in me. It's about the story we tell about our past and how that can either keep us small and constricted and in safety, per se, protected, reactive, or open us up into something so much bigger with pure possibility. And that's what I want to explore in part 2. Because when the meaning of our story changes, my friends, something inside of us becomes free.